You know, for being students of pop culture, as Vince and I like to call ourselves here at Geekvolution, we do an awful lot of comic book and superhero stuff. You might be surprised to learn that I'm not only aware of other media outside of comics and superhero movies, but I actually like and know about some of it here and there. So to prove it, here comes a top 10 list of something that was a big part of defining my childhood, and as ridiculous as it might sound to anyone who didn't grow up on these games, that's the music of the Sonic the Hedgehog games. I, like a lot of people, played the original Super Mario Bros. On a console before I played anything else, but I kinda sucked at it because I didn't own a video game console until about the 4th grade, so it wasn't until Sonic the Hedgehog that I actually got any good at video games. By then, I had had a Super Nintendo for a while and was busy looking for those seemingly never-ending extra hidden levels all over Super Mario World, and I loved the music in that game and the original, and of course Mario 3. But shortly after I got the Super Nintendo, I moved back to my dad's house, and he had this mysterious slate black box called a Sega Genesis, and I had been to Sunday school, so I immediately knew what that meant. Forget the NES and Super Nintendo, heck, forget about the arcade, because once you played this wicked piece of awesome, it'll be like nothing else ever existed. It'd be Genesis. And on the first day, Sega said, let there be Sonic. And there was, and he was good. So unlike most of my friends who were either Nintendo gamers or Sega gamers, I had the best of both worlds. Of course, owning both, I quickly learned that the Super Nintendo was, at least technically, absolutely the superior system. Nearly every third-party title released on both was always better on the SNES, especially the music and sound effects. But Sega also had some radically different and innovative properties going on that Nintendo didn't, and that's why I kept buying their systems, even knowing they might not last and wouldn't have huge game libraries. Sure, the 32X sucked, but I could finally play the original Virtual Fighter at home, and the Saturn had Nights into Dreams. I played Mario and Sonic equally all the time, at least once I figured out how the heck Sonic works. I mean, after so much Mario, the game looked to me like it just played itself. I saw another kid playing the first game at some relative's house before I ever got my hands on it myself, and I couldn't figure it out. How could I possibly maneuver that little blue fuzzy ball guy when he's moving so fast? And why is it whenever I run into a bad guy, they instantly die? Can't you get hurt in this game? What's the point? But regardless of the learning curve and the gameplay, I instantly realized how gold the music was. First off, unlike in the Mario games, there was a new track for every single level. With the zone system, as opposed to Worlds in Mario, you had the tune repeated for each stage or act in a zone, at least at first, until you got to Sonic and Knuckles, and they even mixed the tune up a bit for the second act. But in most of the Mario games, there was a song for each kind of level, but they just kept using them. There was a song for the levels outside on the ground, one for the cloud levels, one for the underground levels, and then one for the water levels. And then when you get to Mario World, most of those were variations on a single tune. Now, don't get me wrong, I love the music in all of those games also. It gets stuck in your head and it's super memorable, and there's a reason Nintendo keeps remixing them for levels in their current Mario games. But in the 16-bit days, Sonic was in a class all by itself when it came to music. It was the first thing I noticed when I turned on the original for the first time. There was so much, dare I say, emotion in it. I'm a little hedgehog spinning around and smacking robotic fish who turn into rabbits when you kill them, but this music sounds really serious, like whatever I'm doing is really important, like somebody forgot to tell the composer he was writing for a game and not a feature film. On a side note, isn't it kind of sad with how often some of this music gets remixed and covered and used as ringtones that nobody knows who wrote these songs? Sure, you could wiki it. The original game was scored by Masato Nakamura, who played with a J-pop band called Dreams Come True. But it's not like the guy ever gets any credit when people play or talk about these songs. The music from the side-scrolling days of Sonic was often very jazzy, upbeat, and listenable. Most of the time it sounded more like it was played on a synthesizer than just tones from a game cartridge. These songs went with the strengths of the console, rather than trying to approximate real-life instruments. The Mario songs did this too, but that music was always just about being really catchy, whereas Sonic music seemed to look to pop music trends of the time and borrow from them. Did that kind of date these games? Absolutely it did, and that makes Mario sound a little more timeless than Sonic, but man, I still love it. So let's get into it. Here are my top 10 side-scrolling Sonic songs. Number 10, the Sonic 2 bonus stage. Sonic quickly became known for its innovative gameplay, and some of that had to do with the 3D first-person perspective bonus stages that started with Sonic 2. In this one, you have to run around a 360-degree road, picking up rings and avoiding mines. The music is kind of like a frantic, electronic-ified Grand Prix racing theme. It always reminded me of playing old racing games at the arcade, especially the opening. Kind of sounds like a checkered flag or a green light on it pop out. These games were usually really good at coming up with music that was thematically appropriate, but memorable and not generic. Number 9, Midnight Greenhouse from Knuckles Chaotix. Sonic games had a lot of this new age jazz dance music kind of stuff, which was in style at the time, and this being at the tail end of the side-scrolling days, not to mention a game Sonic isn't even in, it was nice to see that that style stuck around. The 32X, of course, was a pretty rushed and hackneyed add-on system for the Genesis, but Knuckles Chaotix was definitely one of its finest offerings, and it did a good job of utilizing its enhanced graphics capabilities. I always thought the music was even further taking advantage of this, creating new sounds the 16-bit systems couldn't, but that might have just been my imagination. I chose this track in particular because I love all the improv-like jazz solos. It goes for a full 3 minutes before it starts over, and like a lot of other jazz-inspired Sonic tracks, it doesn't just repeat verses and choruses, but builds on them. Number 8, the boss music from Sonic 3 and Sonic & Knuckles. If it wasn't bouncy and melodic, it was furious and epic. The boss music from Sonic 3 has an urgency to it that makes every boss battle feel like a really big deal, even the easy ones. It sounds like dramatic theatrical score, and it was so good they kept it for Sonic & Knuckles. I like the boss music from the first game too, but I think this one improved on it. It might have been neat if each boss had different music like each zone does, but it's appropriate since they're all Robotnik, and wouldn't you rather have one awesome boss battle song than a bunch of simply adequate ones? Plus, these sections don't last very long, so having music that's short, sweet, and loops makes a lot of sense. When you beat it, you don't feel like you missed anything. It'd be sad if it was a 3-minute track like a lot of the zone music and you just strung the boss along so you could listen to it longer. I'm also glad they had different music for the minor bosses. The robot that just smacks himself in the face and dies in Sonic & Knuckles really doesn't deserve this epicness in the background. I mean, I guess that music is kinda epic too, but still. Number 7, titled Tempest Zone of the Present from Sonic CD. If you've never played Sonic CD, that's a horse of a different color. It's basic Sonic side-scrolling action, except there are way more paths you can choose while completing levels, and you can time travel to the past or the future and see the levels in different time periods. Depending on which period you're in, hazards change and even rings are in different places, which is why you'll see rings stuck inside platforms sometimes. This thing had fantastic music. Being on the Sega CD, again, it could do some things sound-wise the Genesis couldn't. So this song in particular has a vocal track. It's different in the Japanese version, and that music's good too, but it doesn't have this track. We're back to that poppy dance music. It always gets stuck in my head and it's kinda hilarious. I hate water levels most of the time. They can be so tedious and frustrating. But this thing starts up and it's like it's trying to soothe and relax you. No, it's water. Water is relaxing. Just loosen up and play this level. It's as comfortable as your favorite easy chair. And then you play it, and it actually is. It's the most fun water level of any Sonic game I've ever played. Listen to that beginning again. Do you hear that? They rhythmically built in the sound effect of Sonic taking a breath in an air bubble. How clever is that? Number 6, the Toxic Caves from Sonic Spinball. This one is really funky and maybe the most 90s sounding thing of anything on this list. The game is super hard but quite fun once you get the hang of it, and I don't know if this makes any sense, but this sounds like music written for a tough game. It's got kind of an edge to it and an authority. Right out the gate it's like, we know this thing is going to kill you, but it's worth it. To be fair, the first level is fairly easy to get through once you figure out how to get the Chaos Emeralds, but after that, it can get pretty relentless. I've never beaten it. Number 5, Casino Night Zone from Sonic 2. Another staple of the franchise that started with Sonic 2, I don't know who decided to associate a little blue hedgehog saving woodland creatures with gambling, but it always oddly fit. And this is another great example of music that fits the level shtick, but not in an irritating way. It feels like Vegas, but it's still that jazzy pop we've come to expect from these games. Number 4, Chemical Plant Zone from Sonic 2. I'm a little surprised at how much Sonic 2 wound up on this list, but this is definitely one of the most memorable tracks in the franchise. Right away it grabs your attention, and again it goes with the theme. Chemical Plant Zone was a water level with a bunch of surface slides and chutes that slid and shot you all over the place, so the music is frantic, and somehow it feels like it should go with water. Number 3, Flying Battery Zone from Sonic & Knuckles. This is maybe my favorite zone in all of Sonic. There's such a fun variety in platforming in this one, and you're in a flying machine that you get to go in and on top of. The melody of this song is one of the catchiest, and I love how much is going on in the bass line. Sonic & Knuckles was really cool because it took the next step with its music variety. Not only would each zone have its own tune, but for the 2 acts, the second one would be a slight remix of the first one. It's the same tune, but it has a different introduction, and there's variation of what's going on behind the melody. Now that's going above and beyond. Plus, it's just as good, if not better, than the first part. Number 2, Green Hill Zone from Sonic 1. It seemed like every Sonic game had to have a Green Hill Zone or something that looked a lot like it, and these days, a lot of fans roll their eyes when a new game trying to be reminiscent of the old days has to bring back this zone, like Sonic Generations, which, while really fun, if you ask me, didn't have nearly enough levels based on 16-bit games. But this song set the standard. How impressive is it that, like the original Mario, you get it right from the very, very beginning, and rarely, if ever, would you top that first song. Like I said before, it's so dramatic, sucking you into this universe that seems to have its own very specific tone and set of rules. It's a wonderful melody and it's strangely calming. Sometimes Sonic can be really intense, but I used to pop this game in and just play that first zone to relax. It's kind of nice that the first game had 3 acts per zone, too. You had to listen to this theme a little longer, and I never got sick of it. And my number 1 is Marble Zone from Sonic 1. If you know me at all, you knew this was coming. Not only is this my favorite music from a Sonic game, I think it might be my favorite video game music, period. This is where that intensity comes in. We've got lava everywhere, spikes everywhere, lots more enemies than the first level, and it's fairly challenging the first few times, even if you're already pretty adept at platforming. And the music totally reflects that. If you haven't been real impressed with the game from the first zone, this one sure catches your attention on the outset with that introductory 4-note lick, ba-da-ba-bum, over the title of the zone. Unlike a lot of Sonic games' more techno, pop, and jazz tracks, this one feels like it's from another time, giving this place a mysterious and eerie quality. It's another really catchy melody, but it sounds unlike anything else in the entire Sonic library. And you know, it hasn't been feasible for me to put together new episodes of Comic Book Late Night in a long time, so maybe there's a part of me that did this whole thing just so I could do this again.